For the next hour we will control all that you hear.
You are about to experience the knowledge and insights of the media mothership.
Alright, welcome here to Media Mothership, broadcasting out of Edge Radio Studios in Nipaluna, Hobart, Tasmania. We're exploring on this show how media can shape our understanding of the world around us, for good or evil. And I am your host, Dr. Craig, with a PhD. You'll be able to access us over the 99.3 FM radio system, as well as streaming on edgeradio.org.au, and then YouTube and Twitch. Just search for us, Media Mothership. So you can message us on Twitch or YouTube, or directly onto our SMS here, 048888 11707. That number again, 048888 11707. So it's great to be back. Last 2 weeks have been deep dives into the archive of Media Mothership as COVID came and went from the Media Mothership, as always happens. But we're back 100%, enjoying the media material that we'll have to present to you here on Edge Radio. So, topics on today, I want to finally wrap up the 3 Skeleton Key radio drama, and in particular look at ideas around the concept of the point of no return, the point at which the heroes can't proceed any further backwards into their old life, and the major setbacks, climax, and aftermath that's set up in the concluding sequence. Then a little bit of unusual news and curiosities in the media landscape. So all that and more here on Media Mothership, Edge Radio 99.3. So much excitement around the corner. All right, well, it's a little bit of news first. Would you believe it's been 25 years since the Titanic film came and went? That's right, 25 years. And there's been some interesting anniversary stuff. It's back in cinemas for those that can find it in a cinema nearby them. It's also getting some interviews back with Cameron talking about the filming of it. And I want to talk about one particular one. This was an article in UpRock's website talking about that James Cameron went and did a scientific test to prove that Jack had to die in Titanic. Small spoiler, it is the headline of the article, however. To set it up, of course, Mythbusters 6 or so years ago did an episode on the Titanic myth. That is, would Jack have survived if Rose had shared the door? For those that have not seen the movie but know the story of the Titanic, of course, the Titanic sinks as it hits that iceberg, and 2 lovers, Jack and Rose, find themselves in the water, with Jack sacrificing himself so Rose can survive on the detritus that they've got, which is a door. Let's see how the Mythbusters crew set it up first, and then we'll look at the recent research James Cameron's done.
All right, Jamie, at the end of the film Titanic, Rose and Jack are distributed among the detritus of the sunken ship, and Rose is perched on a piece of wood, and Jack is not.
Because there wasn't enough buoyancy to support both of them?
You made a movie about the Titanic?
Yes.
Why would you do that? We already know how it ends.
He doesn't get out much, does he?
No, he doesn't.
That's actually James Cameron there in the little setup they do to introduce the Titanic myth on the Mythbusters. So they have Jamie talking about how, why would you do this film? We will know how it's going to end. And then the question being, how could Jack have survived? So then they go into a little bit more background, which we'll set up through the Mythbusters clip.
The movie, the second highest grossing of all time, was anything but a disaster. But the ending has caused a storm of protest. Desperate to survive in the freezing cold North Atlantic,
Stay on, Rose.
Jack and Rose attempt to clamber onto a piece of debris. And seemingly there's room aboard for just one. And Jack, being the noble hero he is, sacrifices himself to keep Rose's head above water. But multitudes of Titanic and Mythbuster fans don't believe it. James Cameron's inbox has been flooded with the theory that both hero and heroine could have lived to tell their Titanic tale.
You ready to start this test? Okay, Rose. I mean, Jamie. Sorry.
All right, so then the episode, which you can look at on YouTube, sees the two Mythbusters doing an experiment, replicating that final scene from Titanic with a bit of wood, and seeing if they can both comfortably share that bit of wood, similar in a setup at the end of the film. Now, this article that's come out talks about how James Cameron has addressed this issue, right? That in an interview with the Toronto Sun, Cameron addressed the biggest debate about the 1997 Money Gobbler, this film, as the article says, whether both Jack and Cate Winslet's Rose could have fit on the door in the middle of the Atlantic. And Cameron's answer was definitely not, and that he even did a scientific test to prove it. Of course, what's interesting is, the Mythbusters episode, if we jump to the end of the Mythbusters episode to see how they sum it up. So let's see how the Mythbusters test went first before we see if it validates or not Cameron's later scientific research. So this is returning again to the Mythbusters with them sizing up how they've found the myth.
Jack's intentions might have been, sometimes discretion is the better part of valor.
Hang on, Rose!
With all we've learned, I think Jack's death was needless.
So there you go. Their theory, their practice was that they can both comfortably fit in there, and that indeed Jack should have been able to survive as they both could share the door. However, Cameron claiming now that he's done some scientific tests further since then to prove that that's not possible. So here's a quote from Cameron saying, "We've done a scientific study to put this whole thing to rest and drive a stake through its heart once and for all. We have since done a thorough forensic analysis with a hypothermia expert who reproduced the raft from the movie. And we're going to do a little special on that." So again, they've done a little documentary movie piece. So Cameron goes on to explain how it worked. "We took two stunt people who were the same body mass of Cate and Leo, and we put sensors all over them and inside them, and we put them in ice water, and we tested to see whether they could have survived through a variety of methods. And the answer was there was no way they both could have survived. Only one could survive." So Cameron's claiming his test contradicts the previous test in 2012 by Mythbusters, which concluded that Jack's death was needless. Of course, it is Cameron's film, and now I guess that he's scientifically proven it, that Jack has to die. It also does fit in with storytelling, of course. So it's interesting needing to prove the science behind the resolution that Cameron obviously felt fitted so nicely with the story's themes and the resolution arc that he set up in the film. Ultimately, it goes addressing the idea of good storytelling. Cameron says that it's a movie about love and sacrifice and mortality. The love is measured by the sacrifice. So, the story demands that Jack dies. The science, conveniently now for Cameron, has backed it up, even though the Mythbusters claimed it wouldn't. So interesting piece there. If anyone's going back to enjoy the 25th anniversary of Titanic, maybe look at that end scene and ask you whether the suspension of disbelief managed to make it through right to the end of the film. Talking about how media can frame reality, that is Cameron's Titanic scene with Cate Winslet and DiCaprio realistic in terms of the death of Jack, right? Did Jack have to die? Is that realistic? Here we have kind of an example of media realism. This was an interesting piece that was picked up on the Mercury website, the local Mercury newspaper website. The headline being Cate Blanchett on Jimmy Kimmel. And the quote is, "Go to Tasmania and they play real football." So this was, of course, the Australian screen legend Cate Blanchett, who was on Jimmy Kimmel's TV show, spruiking her current media work and talking about football, Australian rules football, while discussing the Super Bowl. And it's interesting that suddenly this Tasmanian reference popped up. Let's listen to it now as they go into the setup and payoff with Cate Blanchett actually referencing Tasmania in an American television live interview.
So you did not watch the Super Bowl yesterday? I know you're from Australia, so it would make sense that you would not have
Look,
interest.
to be honest, it's a gladiatorial sport. Where I come from, we have a football. We call it football. It's Aussie rules. Where
Footy, you call it, right?
Yeah, footy.
Yeah.
And they basically, they have a similar kind of ball, except they don't have the protection.
They don't even have sleeves, right? They were wearing...
they wear shorts and really, little tank tops. And my uncle used to play professionally for Essendon.
Oh, he did? Wow.
Yeah, and my cousin played in Tasmania, where it's so hardcore that they play on gravel.
Is that true?
Yeah, so, I mean, the Super Bowl, it's like, they take a few hits, but you go to Tasmania and they play real football.
On gravel?
On gravel, yeah.
That's not kidding around at all.
No, it's not.
Yeah, I know a lot of...
They lose a lot of players, but,
in some ways...
That's why the population's really small.
In a lot of ways...
Wow, all right. So, interesting. I guess there's Tassie soft power for you. The idea that we have this kind of brutalizing gravel football pitch through which Tassie footy players and Tassie in general really powers up. Obviously it's a joke. Obviously it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, and also that she delivers that final point about the population, of course, the sustainability of the population struggling because of the turnaround of mortality caused by Queenstown's famous gravel footy field. But I think I'm curious whether this will trigger any media tourism or maybe sports tourism to Queenstown's famous gravel footy field. Could this be something that Queenstown could now jump on in terms of getting some further exposure for gravel footy playing and its importance, its significance? Gravel footy playing, is this important? I'll have to get the sports guys here on Edge to do a show on this, I think. Gravel footy playing. I might, yeah. So there we go. Let's think about that in terms of, is this something to celebrate or something to be a little concerned on? Interestingly, Jimmy Kimmel kind of then explains, I guess, the mythologizing of Australian sports. If we're thinking about how Australia represents itself overseas, obviously we've got some really old references like Crocodile Dundee or Crocodile Hunter, maybe some new references like Bluey, which I think is a very positive, constructive one. And then we have sport. So just wrapping it up, let's listen to how Jimmy Kimmel, the American host, then kind of contextualizes Australian strength, I guess, the strength that he sees with this footy idea.
Ways I think we as Americans see Australia the way everyone else sees Americans, as like a little bit screw loose and really flirting with danger at all times. Yes, that is what we think.
Why did you go cross-eyed when you did that?
It's just
and
how
you're
I was
looking
born.
at me. Is that...
But really, though, they're out there. They have no helmets on. They're killing each other in the same way. They're
I know.
kicking the ball. They're totally exposed.
I know. And then the hole in the ozone layer is right over Australia, so it's It's a very, very difficult
And they're
game.
kicking those footies right through it.
So that was nothing last night, Patrick.
Congratulations.
Alrighty, so again, the idea being that Australia is a kind of dangerous location, right? Which is also rippling into the, small spiders and snakes will kill you kind of idea. That we've got the ozone hole straight over us, and it's a kind of intense, brutalizing environment. Interesting myth building there. Interesting, in terms of whether Australia can leverage kind of positiveness out of this. Jimmy Kimmel kind of dovetails into it, talking about how the screw loose idea, the risk-taking concept, I guess, that there's a kind of bravado here. And again, what's important is it's immortalised by Queenstown's gravel footy pitch. Exciting news there. Exciting news. I'm keen to see where this goes. Obviously, we'll be keeping a close eye on it here, tracking how it trends as a meme across the internet and beyond. All right, I want to return now to Three Skeleton Key, wrap this up. It's been an exciting adventure that we've had into the classic radio drama Three Skeleton Key, as we're nearing the end now. So, of course, a bit of background here. Three Skeleton Key, 1950, the 1950 episode of it. There's been 3 great versions in the golden age of radio. This is the second, starring Vincent Price. He went on to do a third version of it. This is the second version that he does, the 1950 version. And it's part of the radio anthology series Escape, which I strongly recommend if anyone's struggling falling asleep. Not that it's boring, but it's wonderful evening listening, the Escape series. You can easily find tons of episodes on YouTube. Most of it's in public domain. This is from the Escape anthology series, Three Skeleton Key. And as we set up in previous episodes, it involves a trio of lighthouse point keepers who find themselves besieged after a derelict ship crashes into nearby rocks, ejecting its passengers. That is a army of ravenously hungry rats onto this rocky outcrop. Our heroes have no chance of escape, surrounded by water, with no supply ship due for a few months. So they're stuffed, and they've got ravenously hungry rats around them. As we talked about before, we've set up how we've passed the midpoint. The rats have kind of been breaking into the lighthouse now. They thought they'd been protected, but the lighthouse fuel now has been inaccessible, and there's no way of contacting Hope. Louis, one of the other lighthouse keepers, is clearly going mad. The other lighthouse keeper's been bitten. Our hero, Vincent Price, is still okay, or is he? And now we're going to see what's going to happen next. So we've talked a little bit about the key storytelling patterns which have been set up. The inciting incident, that is the boat that crashed, the kind of ghost ship that crashed against the rocks, disgorging the rats. Strongly has a setting narrative, the trope of the lighthouse point that it's setting up. Most excitingly so far has been the inciting incident, the swarm of rats. So now what we're going to do is kind of take apart, as we're reaching Act 3, this idea of setting up the point of no return. That is our heroes, or our lighthouse keepers, I don't know if they could really be heroes, are stuck. There's no way out of there. There's no way they can rescue themselves further. And we're going to head into some further complications, higher stakes. Let's see how the next, we've got about 10 minutes left, the next few minutes, set up the highest stakes, then the climax and aftermath. Is it satisfying? So to return now to Three Skeleton Key with Vincent Price, as they're attempting to save themselves from the horde of rats. Here we are at the 21-minute point, 10 minutes left.
By morning, the air in the little room was horrible. Until now, we'd been getting air from the tower below. Now that was sealed off, and so was all our food and water. We lay exhausted, panting, waiting. And the hours crawled on. I was almost dozing from fatigue when I saw a sight that brought me too fast.
Would you like to come in, my beauties? Would you? I hold the powers of life and death, and I can let you in, you know.
August was standing by the glass, and in one hand he held a wrench. He was tapping the glass gently, not quite hard enough to break it. I eased myself to my feet and slowly, very slowly, tiptoed toward him.
All I have to do is tap just a little harder, and
I found a coil of wire in the toolkit, and I trussed him up, fastened him to a stanchion in the center of the room. Louis was of no help. He lay on his side, looking at his bloody hand, weak and sick as a baby. So there I was, a lunatic and a coward for company, and all about watching our little drama, the rats. The day dragged by. The supply boat wasn't due for another 12 days. I don't know what they could have done if they had come. We had only one way of summoning them, and that was to shoot off distress rockets, but the rockets were 4 floors below. And even if they'd been right there in the gallery, I couldn't have opened a window to fire them. That night, I tended the light, but its flame was devouring our oxygen. The following day, we lay, thirst-tormented, starving, waiting, and the following night, I again tended the light, but the small supply of spare wicking we kept in the gallery had become exhausted, and quite suddenly, about midnight, the light went out. There's nothing I could do. Wicks were stored 3 levels below. Nothing I could do. Nothing. From time to time, I'd strike a match to see the clock. When I did, it lit up the million red eyes about us. All about us. Watching. Waiting. Below, it had grown quiet. They'd cleaned us out, and now they, too, were waiting. All waiting. And then the rats, quite suddenly, were silent. And then I heard it.
All right, we'll pause it there. We're entering now the final 5 minutes, and it really is almost like clockwork in terms of the structure that it's setting up here. We're very much at that point where it appears all is lost. The stakes have increased. There's no way they can get down to the storage room. There's no way they can get the wicks to relight the lighthouse. The lighthouse light's gone off. Everything's lost. And it seems like it's just a matter of time until our heroes are eaten by the rats. To hear where we're at, I want to play a section from Film Courage's YouTube clip looking at this concept of the point of no return in a screenplay as Michael Haig unpacks it, particularly in terms of complications and higher stakes, and kind of unpack what we've just listened to. So here's Film Courage with Michael Haig.
6-stage plot structure. You've touched on each point briefly, and I know we went into depth on stage 1 and stage 2. Can we go further into depth on stage 3, which is progress of the character?
Sure. Once the character has formulated their outer motivation, that necessary visible goal that's going to lead us all the way to the climax, stage 3 is where they start pursuing it. They formulate a plan and they start going after that goal. And that's where they start encountering more and more of the conflict, more and more of the obstacles standing in their way. Either obstacles that are coming from the outside world, such as forces of nature, if it's, say, an avalanche in a movie like that, or a fire, or a disease, or an alien invasion, which is...
Or in this case, a swarm of rats. So we're certainly having an escalation of higher stakes here as danger is coming from outside onto our 3 lighthouse keepers.
It's kind of like a force of nature, or from other characters. If it's a thriller and it's a bad guy, you know, coming after our hero or something like that. But those obstacles are going to start appearing.
And there are some further obstacles we're seeing. So just in the 5 minutes we've listened to, we've seen the 2 other lighthouse keepers beginning to become trouble. So one of them has received a nasty cut from a rat, and that's basically put him into a state of complete shutdown. That character is now gone. He's just a quivering mess in the side. And then our third lighthouse keeper has gone crazy. He's starting to talk to the rats, and he was using a hammer to kind of gently tap against the glass to tease the rats, obviously in a kind of suicidal way. So both other characters are beginning to have serious internal struggles, which may put them over the edge to become kind of, you know, part of the problem themselves.
They're going to have to avoid them or overcome them or whatever, but their plan seems to be working well. That's why I call it progress. But on the inner journey level, something else happens that's critical. Because remember, I talked about a character's identity, this false persona that they wear to keep them emotionally safe, to keep them from taking too much emotional risk, and where they can hide the thing that frightens them most.
So it's interesting, the other 2 characters have, both at the start of Three Skeleton Key, are set up as kind of full of bravado. We have the one character who is the leader of the 3 lighthouse keepers and has projected himself as kind of a no-nonsense, man of few words guy. But that bravado has been completely lost by losing a battle to the rats and being savaged by it in a way now that he is a quivering mess on the side of the room they're in. And the other character, the kind of ex-actor, has had a mental breakdown and is clearly close to suicidal thoughts.
Well, because the rule is they can't achieve the visible goal without stepping into their essence and out of that persona, they're going to have to drop the armor in order to make progress toward that goal. The problem with dropping the armor is it's terrifying emotionally. So take, for example, in Hitch, as he starts falling for the Eva Mendes character, it's very scary for him because his armor is, I don't really fall in love myself. That's not for me. I'm just a one-night stand kind of guy. I help other guys fall in love. So the more vulnerable he needs to get in order to win her love, the scarier it's going to be for him. So what will happen in this stage is the hero will vacillate back and forth between identity and essence. They'll open up and take courageous steps toward their goal, but then they will, in return, retreat because it'll get too scary emotionally, especially if you're dealing with the inner journey and it's like a love story, a romantic comedy, or something where there really needs to be a deep transformation.
The inner journey idea is interesting. There hasn't been too much inner journey going on with 3 lighthouse keepers, apart from those transitions I've mentioned with the 2 other lighthouse keepers, both of whom have faced a kind of dark moment and have come up failing. But our Vincent Price character is reactive still. I mean, again, they had a plan to bunker up. Things seem to be going well, but now the rats have gotten in and they're only stuck in the very top of the lighthouse now to survive. But he's not really being able to work with his other 2 lighthouse keepers. This is not really your classic kind of survivors reality show where deals are done and now they're all working together. It's interesting to see where this final 5 minutes is going to go. Is it going to be Vincent Price character being able to somehow Rambo his way out to become an actor, an agent of kind of action, finds a machine gun and manages to do it? Is that going to be something he can do? Will he become active and a protagonist or not? It'll be interesting to see. Let's listen to the final bit here from Michael Haig talking about complications and higher stakes as we hit this point of no return.
If you take Good Will Hunting as an example, his goal is to win the love of Skylar. Good Will Hunting is basically strictly a love story. That's really what it is. Is he going to win the love of Minnie Driver, the Minnie Driver character? Well, as he starts dating her, they start getting close. He gets scared and then he backs off. And when he's talking to Sean, the Robin Williams character, Sean at one point says, well, what about that girl you were dating? And he said, oh, no, you know how it is to go on a second date, then they don't really live up to what you expected them to be. And then Sean in return says, maybe what you're afraid of is you won't live up to what she expects you to be. Because what Sean is there for is to keep pointing out the emotional fear that Will Hunting carries around because of his abused path. So we see as he's dating Skylar, he gets closer to her and then he doesn't talk to her. And he'll get closer and then they'll manufacture an argument. And it's back and forth, vacillating between identity and essence.
Identity and essence. So let's see if this final section of Three Skeleton Key can propel us into a vacillation of identity and essence, or is this not a character development? Is this not a character arc of Vincent Price's character to become something different? Let's find out. So returning here to Three Skeleton Key, the final section.
And then I saw the sky and the stars. The rats were gone. I went to the glass. Out there on the water, a small freighter, a banana boat, showing a few lights, came softly and innocently at us. The light was out. They didn't know. I wanted to open the windows to call out to them, to warn them somehow, but I was afraid. What if the rats were hiding from me, tricking me? So I waited. She grounded very softly on a reef not 200 yards from the quay. Grounded so gently that the man playing the cornet, was he a passenger or crewman off watch, didn't even stop playing. They tried washing her back off. I could have told them to save their fuel. The tide was rising, would have floated her free. And I waited. That's all. That's the story. The sun came up and there wasn't a rat on the whole quay. Every last one of that terrible army had left us, gone back to sea on their new ship. Auguste, insane asylum, he never recovered. And Louis, they took him into Cayenne where he died of blood poisoning from his bite. Oh, yes. Well, that's the whole of it. And if you'll excuse me now, I must go set my traps. No mouse traps. No rats in this lighthouse, I should say not. Life in the lights isn't bad, but sometimes when I see a strange vessel approaching, I get a little nervous, sure. Somewhere on the seas, there's a little banana boat without a crew. That is, without a human crew.
Escape is produced and directed by William N. Robeson. Tonight we have presented Three Skeleton Key by George Tadouz, adapted for radio by James Poe and starring Vincent Price as Jean. Supporting Mr. Price were Harry Bartell as August and Jeff Corey as Louis. Sound effects on Three Skeleton Key, created by Cliff Thorsness and executed today by Mr. Thorsness, Gus Bays, and Jack Sixsmith, have been awarded the Best of the Year by Radio and Television Life magazine. Harry Essman was at the control panel, and special music was arranged and conducted by Del Castillo. Next week,
You are swimming for your life in the dangerous waters off the Florida Gulf Coast, about to be smashed by a launch carrying a vicious criminal who must kill you or die himself. And on shore 500 yards away, the police are waiting to arrest you for murder, and there can be no escape.
Next week, we escape with an exciting tale of temptation and death on the Gulf Coast of Florida, as John and Gwen Bagney tell it in Danger at Matagumba. Goodbye then until the same time next week, when once again we offer you Escape.
How exciting was that? Escape. And there we go. So story concludes with a second boat hitting those rocks because the lighthouse tower was no longer functioning. The banana boat couldn't avoid it, hit it, and then you had that wonderful, wonderful build-up with the sound of the tuba player or musical player, and then suddenly his song is cut off mid-chord, as we can imagine what's happening is that all of the rats have found their new boat, and some delicious kind of narrating there by Vincent Price at the end as he reflects on his own kind of haunted fear that out there is a boat with no crew, no human crew. So yeah, but again, it's not really a twist. The end of this story is that three lighthouse keepers did nothing really to finally save themselves. It was purely bad luck on another boat mooring itself on those rocks, meaning all the rats decided they are boat rats, I guess, and they all went back to that boat. So that was the Act 3. Let's hear, again, to return to Michael Haig, how he talks about Act 3 screenplay structure, major setback, climax, and aftermath, thinking about that climax and aftermath setup that we've had there. So this is Michael Haig now.
Turning point 4, which is at 3/4 of the movie. So we're 3/4 in, the major setback. Talk about that.
Yeah. The hero of the story has been pursuing this visible goal from the beginning of Act 2. Okay, once they have this finish line that they must cross, that your audience and your reader is rooting for them to achieve by the end of the story. All the way through, as they pursued this, the obstacles have been getting bigger and bigger. Finally, your hero, at the 3/4 mark if it's a screenplay, or somewhere around that if it's a novel, is going to encounter an obstacle they can't overcome. It's going to be something that defeats them, and it must seem to your readers or to your audience like all is lost.
We certainly reached that point in that final act where Vincent Price's character had given up. Both Louis and Auguste had been knocked out, right? Auguste suffering the attack and Louis having a breakdown, and Vincent Price's character just thinking, this is it, the rats are going to get through, there's no chance of escape, there's no one coming to save us, that's it.
Like now, oh my God, there's no way they're going to succeed at achieving this goal. And the hero gives up because their plan is out the window and they have no idea how they're going to achieve the goal now. So if you take a movie like Titanic, what happens is the ship is sinking, and finally it gets so scary and the obstacles are so great when Cal, her jerk of a boyfriend, comes along and says, I found a lifeboat for you. She gets on the lifeboat, even though she knows it means leaving Jack, and we all realize if she leaves Jack, the Leo DiCaprio character, on the ship and she gets on the lifeboat, all is going to be lost. Okay, so that's the major setback there. Or it's in a recent movie, a really sort of tight thriller called Don't Breathe that came out a few weeks ago before this video was made. It's a very simple thing. They're trying to rob a blind guy of some money, and the blind guy knows they're in his house and have locked him inside. So it's kind of a haunted house movie, but no ghosts. It's just a very intense, closed-in, claustrophobic thriller. And I believe, if I remember it correctly, what happens at the major setback is one of the main characters gets killed by the blind guy, and now there's only one person left, and she has to somehow escape. So it seems like there's no way of getting out of this situation. Okay? When that happens, the hero is going to retreat. They're not only going to try and go back to where they were living at the setup, but they're also on the inner journey level going to retreat into their identity.
So I guess that has happened in terms of all three characters have retreated to, where it started. That is the lamp of the lighthouse. Even though the lamp no longer functions, they've retreated physically and mentally back to a state of, complete passivity. So I think that holds up well, that we've had the major setback, all is lost. It doesn't appear any of the three lighthouse keepers are going to survive now. This is it. The rats are going to get them.
They're going to go back into that protective persona where they were emotionally shut down at the beginning of the story. They're saying to themselves, I knew this was stupid. I knew I never should have gone for this. I shouldn't have opened up. I shouldn't have tried to find true love. I shouldn't have tried to take this emotional risk. You see what happens. If you're writing a love story or romantic comedy, the two lovers must break up at this point. You have to split them apart. And the hero will go back and say, I'm never going to fall in love again. Hitch is a good example of that because the truth comes out. She finds out he's really the date doctor. She assumes, the Eva Mendes character, assumes that Will Smith's character has been lying to her. They break up and he gives up. He says to Albert, I got nothing. It's stupid to fall in love. You can get past it. I'm not going to jump out of a plane without a parachute. And so the character will retreat back into that safe emotional place, but it's not a fulfilling place. That's the rule. They can't have what they want and they can't live a fulfilled, evolved existence if they stay in that identity. And once we have experienced...
So in this case, I guess, in the lighthouse, they've just retreated and they're going to face death, right? They've given up, major setbacks occurred, there's no way out, there's no one coming to help them, and they will die. So again, Michael Haig's talking here about romance comedy movies, can be applied to a thriller like this. Certainly the climax being one of how can they escape this.
Experienced our essence, like these characters have as they move closer to the goal. Going back fully into our identity doesn't really cut it anymore because we can't pretend like that's who we truly are. We've actually had the experience in real life and in story form of living a more fulfilled existence. So after that retreat, the hero is going to realize, doesn't matter what it costs, I've got to keep going after what I want. I've got to be that courageous. And then they go into what I call the final push. And that's stage 5 of the 6 stages, where they put everything on the line in order to achieve that outer motivation. They're either going to win or they're going to die trying.
So it's interesting in this case that that final stage is removed from Pre-Skeleton Key. That we're at that point where, come on, Vincent, you've got to pull something out and Rambo yourself out of this. That doesn't happen. An external force intercedes. That is another boat crashes on the rocky outcrop. And that is the solution that suddenly all the rats go. And and Vincent Price's character is just amazed. Oh my God, the rats are gone. Where is everyone? Or where are the rats? And they've gone into that other now haunted ghost rat ship that will be out there in the ocean, possibly for someone else to find.
And the climax is just the scene which must resolve that question. They either win or they lose. You can't be ambiguous about it. If they win, it means they're fully in their essence. If they aren't fully in their essence, they must lose. And then the final stage is simply what I call the aftermath. It's the after picture, the before and after picture the story creates. The before picture was a hero fully in his identity. The after picture is a hero fully in his or her essence, reaping the rewards of having found the courage to complete that arc.
So it's interesting, I think, because maybe in that final act, Vincent Price's character, didn't have a character development per se. Instead, we're left with this haunted ending to Three Skeleton Key, where, there's no boon of knowledge except the boon of knowledge knowing that out there is this boat full of rats that is haunted by still. So there is this kind of, great opportunity for a sequel where, this kind of like the Vincent Price's character hasn't quite had that inner journey yet. It's in terms of Michael Haig's argument around the romance comedy structure, we haven't yet arrived at that point for Vincent Price's character, knowing that the other two lighthouse keepers, August and Louis, August dies and Louis is in a mental asylum, that Vincent Price's character is, it's kind of, basically unchanged, right? He's still working lighthouses, and he's setting traps, but not because he's in a kind of another rat-infested place. He's kind of unchanged, but what is changed about him is that kind of unresolved fear that out there is this boat of rats, which haunts him. So, the aftermath in this case is kind of interesting in terms of it's more of that kind of ambivalent ending, that kind of open-ended ending of horror that remains undefeated in this way, right? The rats were never disposed of. They lived and got onto another boat. The rats, this is in many cases a story of the rats getting what they wanted, back on another boat. So maybe you could write a quite interesting Rosencrantz and Guildenstern type story here, a la Hamlet, and do it from the rat's point of view. Who knows? Well, that was the interesting adventure into Three Skeleton Keys. I hope you've enjoyed that. We'll have a dig around for some other classic radio dramas to unpack storytelling and the representation of the world around us through. But thanks for listening. This has been Dr. Craig for Media Mothership on Edge Radio for another week. Show notes, as always, are available on the episode description via YouTube or Twitch or your podcast supplier. Next week we'll be setting up a new radio drama, so stay tuned for that. We'll post some information up on Instagram. You can listen to our previous episodes on YouTube, Twitch, or at edgeradio.org.au. And podcasts are available via your podcast provider of choice. Find out more about Media Mothership on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed listening to this pop culture deep dive, also check out Edge Radio's Millennial Think with Hannah and Miranda every Wednesday at 10 a.m. And after them at 11 a.m. is Pop Topic Taz with the Taz Pop Group, who talk about everything around cosplay, video games, events, art, music, and so much more that's going on. Keep listening now. Around the corner on Edge Radio, we have Adrian with You Can't Sit Down.